Welcome to our Saturday simulcast. After a couple weeks of NCAA basketball, we're back on to at least our simulcast format, and Brian Neubert and Tom Dienhart will join me, Brian, here shortly. Want to thank the Purdue Union Club Hotel for sponsoring. We also want to remind folks that the Boilerhouse Prime opens in West Lafayette. It'll be open next week, I believe, on a permanent basis. I'll take Brian out there for a good steak dinner sometime here soon. But it's a really beautiful spot, and I guess even the lower area is already open. But it will be a special part of the Burke Boilermaker complex. Dining rooms, refined, club-inspired ambience with a 2-story wine wall and a grand 30-seat bar and a great view of Ackerman Allen Golf Course. Obviously, you can also savor an exclusive raw bar and signature cups of beef. Visit boilerhouseprime.com for more information. And now we'll bring in our primetime guy, Brian Neubert. And obviously, with this nothing going on in the world of Purdue sports. We always say that, but a lot, obviously, with the Portal Watch going on an hourly basis, you can still have a life outside of this, but there's a lot of things that you are paying attention to. Obviously, this week, busy with not only Will Bergen and Brian Waddell and Cam Heide and Miles Colvin going in, of course, Oscar Clough coming to Purdue. I guess an opening statement of what this is this going to be 18 more days of pins and needles, or how, from Purdue perspective, or how do you view this and moving ahead for those that are watching this closely, which seems to be about everybody? It's crazy.
Before I start talking, a quick editor's note here. I am in the final throes of my annual 2-month-long cough at the end of basketball season. The ninth inning of this thing every year is always the worst, so I may completely lose it during this podcast.
All right, we'll keep it short. No, we won't. We'll allow you to listen.
Yeah. So Purdue loses 4 guys. 2 of those guys, were relevant guys. I think nobody should be surprised. Brian Waddell and Will Berg left. The writing was kind of on the wall. Both those guys want to play. And it wasn't going to happen at Purdue. That had become abundantly clear. I do think had Brian Waddell not got injured, his freshman year, I think maybe that turns out differently for him. But the reality was, this is a Purdue program now that can't wait on people. It's always in win now mode. Can say a little bit of the same thing for Will Berg. I think he was a project coming in. It's hard to recruit internationally during COVID. Purdue didn't get a great look at him, let's just say, but that was at the height of Matt Painter's infatuation with 7-footers, and they were bound to miss. And this was a miss. I mean, for as much as everybody loved Will Berg and for as important as he stepped up, in that High Point game.
Yep.
Purdue needs these guys ready to play and contribute, and that really, he had his opportunity early in the year. It was pretty evident, pretty quick that he wasn't going to be that guy in this different year where center at Purdue was a role. It wasn't it was going to be, when it became Trey Kaufman-Renn, then it became a centerpiece again. But had it not gotten to Trey Kaufman-Renn, it would have been a role, whether that was Daniel Jacobson, that didn't last very long, Will Berg, whoever it might have been, Raleigh Burgess. It was a role. It was a guy who was just there to rebound and dunk. Wasn't going to get a lot of post touches, wasn't going to run a lot of ball screens. That was all going to be handled by Trey Kaufman-Renn. And, Will Berg had his opportunity, and it didn't go great. And it was pretty evident neither of those guys were going to play for Purdue much next season. Purdue was talking openly for weeks about, having to recruit size for next year's team. They're basically talking publicly about recruiting over Will Berg.
Yeah.
That's one of the weird, awkward dynamics of the portal era here is you're gonna have people recruiting people's replacements while they're still on the team. Awkward. But no, to Colvin and Heide, both good players, both guys who can really play, but both guys, who did not have straight lines to, starting and or leading man type of roles at Purdue. And I'm sure they want those sort of roles, as any player should. I mean, this is the era of ambition. And when you're a good player, the days of, waiting your turn and things like that, I'm not sure those days aren't over. Um, I think last season illustrated that Cam Heidi's best position was the 4. Well, who's produced 4 next season? Trakoff Moran.
Yeah.
Who's going to be a preseason All-American next year, right? So getting Oscar Clough, who we'll talk about later, to go along with Daniel Jacobson suddenly turns your center position from a weakness to a potential strength that pushes Trakoff Moran back to the 4. Presumably, I mean, this is all to be determined, but I think this is a very safe projection I'm making here.
Yeah.
That Trakoff Moran's probably going to start. And you also probably didn't recruit Oscar Clough to not be a starter. And you need size desperately. So you're going to default back to playing size in your first unit. So thus, that game of musical chairs there basically pushes Trakoff Moran into Cam Heidi's position. Miles Colvin, again, a good player who did a lot of stuff for Purdue this year and last. Purdue needs ball handlers on the floor. They really, really value having ball handlers on the floor. And, Miles Colvin's not that guy. He can shoot. He's an athlete, but he's not that guy who can handle the ball on the open floor very comfortably. He's not that guy who can attack closeouts off the dribble very well. That was going to give Jakari Harris and C.J. Cox a real advantage there. So if you're Miles Colvin and you're a really talented guy, the opportunity you were going to get somewhere else as opposed to a 3-way timeshare, as was largely the case this year, you almost can't blame the kid. And when you look at the money they're going to get, they would have been paid well at Purdue. That's a misnomer that Purdue doesn't have money.
Yeah.
Purdue has proven here that it has money. And they would have done well here, but there's a lot of first-year coaches out there who are spending like drunken sailors here because they have to assemble teams. Everybody's got to spend all their NIL money before July 1st.
Right, the back of the Brinks truck. Yep.
I don't know if you remember the movie Brewster's Millions, but this is that.
Yeah.
You have all this money and you have to spend it by a certain date, which is a problem I'd love to have. But they are probably both good players, mind you, but they're probably getting paid more than what market value would be in a normal year for them because your best ability right now is availability. And, Camden Heide and Miles Colvin could go on to be really, really good players for somebody else. And it's really hard to blame people nowadays for looking for upward mobility in their opportunity. You only get one of these college careers. You only get to play 4 years unless you're, Boo Booey or any of those guys who've been haunting the Big Ten since like 1995. So I think that, Purdue probably was disappointed to lose both of those guys. Probably not terribly surprised. Not shocked, I should say. I think after the initial 2 obvious ones left, I think there was probably a sense that everybody else was going to come back. The way the season ended for Camden Heide and Miles Colvin, I think was pretty positive. But once you get out of that locker room, it's the real world. It's the real world again, and you got to look out for number 1. And I don't think Purdue's sitting here blaming or upset with Camden Heide and Miles Colvin. I think they're rooting for him, and I don't think a lot of these things are going to be terribly contentious. But it wouldn't shock me at all if Cam Heide turns into a really good player for Texas, and wherever Miles Colvin ends up, he turns out to be a really good player for them too.
Yeah, Heide and Texas going to Sean Miller. That news came out on Friday evening, and no news yet on where Miles Colvin is going to
I want to say
land.
something else real quick.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Both of those guys. This has to be really compelling content here.
I know it is. It is.
Hey,
we're hanging on every word, my friend.
Listen to Brian Neubert cough. So both of those guys, they were in the starting five relatively close to midway through the season. They had opportunities there to lock that thing down. And, it turned out maybe it wasn't both of them playing badly, but they didn't shoot very well. And I think the ball handling issue, was one Purdue dealt with in non-conference when Purdue just didn't have enough ball handlers. So when they played pressure, when they played Marquette, when they played Texas A&M, when they played Penn State, which was Penn State's Super Bowl, they really struggled. And, that was an issue Purdue had to be on top of all season long. Enter CJ Cox into the starting five, enter Big Ten style of play, and all of a sudden, kind of things changed a little bit. You didn't have those same issues. When you had turnover issues, it wasn't the secondary ball handlers who were the problem. So I think that both of those guys, Miles Colvin, Camden Heide, under a different set of circumstances, if maybe they were slightly different players, I think this could have worked out very differently. Their role in Purdue's offense, they will never get a better system for what they do. Because when you're the far side corner guy with Braden Smith and ball screen offense, you're either getting an open three or you're getting a guy with his shoulders turned toward the baseline who's chasing you frantically, who, if you can dribble past, and more often than not, get all the way to the rim because everybody else is headed toward Braden Smith. That's what I think Purdue needs a little bit more of next year to really complete this thing. And that was an opportunity where the two guys who left could have really done some damage this year had they been well suited to do that sort of thing. Again, two really good players, but maybe not ideal for where they were within, kind of within Purdue's offense.
Oscar Clough obviously makes the announcement, Monday and or Tuesday, I guess it was this week. Of course, 6'11" Australian comes to Purdue from Washington State and, of course, South Dakota State. And a guy that you did a good breakdown of him. And if you haven't seen it on the site, I suggest that you check it out. When you kind of did a film evaluation of him. Seems to be, again, going to make an interesting front court. And, again, we're making the assumption and that the big three are coming back, and we'll talk about that specifically as well. But just talk about just the eyeball test with Oscar and what he brings and what Purdue's offense might look like with him next year, and how he and Trey Kaufman-Renn will coexist maybe, and they'll thrive in that, I would think, based on the eyeball test with Clough. But what do you see there?
I see phlegm build up in the back of my throat.
I feel sorry for you. We can do this by sign language, but that won't do much good.
No,
go ahead.
I can't do that. I think Purdue's got to become a better rebounding team, and they need rim protection. And to go from 6'9" Trey Kaufman-Renn playing center with Wilberg on occasion backing him up, with Caleb First on occasion rolling in there as a backup as well. That's a weakness, because that's not those guys' strengths. Defensive rebounding, although Kaufman-Renn did an unbelievable job in the NCAA tournament as a defensive rebounder.
It's knees.
Obviously, it didn't click with Wilberg. You had to have an advantage when he was in there, and you didn't really have an advantage. Now you go from that to having one of the best defense, or the most productive defensive rebounders in college basketball, and a potentially elite shot blocker coming in behind him, and two guys who are 6'11" or taller who you can throw the ball to in the post. So those moments when Trey Kaufman-Renn rotates out, opponents still have to guard the post. That's not something they really had to do this past year, because Purdue didn't have really an interior scoring identity without Kaufman-Renn on the floor, and that knocked Purdue's offense out of balance when Kaufman-Renn got in foul trouble, or Kaufman-Renn just had to come out of the game because he's a human being, and every human being has to come out of the game.
Except Braden Smith.
Unless you're Braden Smith, which
right.
In which case you don't have to come out of the game.
Right.
So I think it's the combination of Clough and Daniel Jacobson that really transforms what you saw this season into something very different next season. Again, potentially. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing with my fingers. You want to do sign language? I can't even figure this out.
That's
This
quotes.
could potentially turn your open wound of a gaping void of a whatever other descriptor I can come up with here of your team, the thing you built your whole defense around covering up. You could turn that into a strength. I think, we talked a couple of years ago about Lance Jones being the right recruit at the right time. And we might be saying the same thing about Oscar Clough, because rebounding is such a big deal for Purdue. And it's such a big deal in basketball in general. And you just got a guy who didn't play at the Big Ten level here this past year, but averaged like 12.7 rebounds per game and, was top 5 or whatever in both defensive rebounding percentage and offensive rebounding percentage, if I'm remembering that correctly, while I try to fight back this dreaded cough here. So you have gone from a deficient rebounding team potentially to a plus rebounding team, because the sliding scale then becomes not only adding a 6'11" and a 7'4" guy to center, who are both going to be good rebounders, but you're also moving Trey Kaufman to the 4, so you have size there too. So it's it is going to be really interesting to see how Purdue can turn a lot of its problems this season into potential strengths, really meaningful solutions.
Yeah. All right, the most Matt Painter was asking field of 68. Of course, he's down at the Final Four, which will be played today. Obviously, the 2 national semifinal games. And the most asked question, I think, maybe in West Lafayette, at least for myself, history is, what is Braden Smith going to do? Now, Matt skillfully answered the question asked on field of 68 by going on and saying we're all living in this environment and dealing with it. And he also went on to say what a fabulous player Braden Smith is. Both are true things. I have to look at that and say, no matter what happens, and I think I know what you're going to say in terms of what it looks to be. Matt Painter's not going to steal anybody's thunder in this situation, and he's also never, you never say never in any of these deals too. But your feeling has always been that it appears, and it would appear to me, that if Oscar Clough is coming, that would lead me to believe that the other 3 will be staying. What say you? Is that a fair assumption to make? Obviously, Purdue's got an extremely good nucleus coming back that is capable of playing this weekend next year if all comes to pass. But how do you view not only the Braden Smith situation, but any other potential transfers?
Well, I'm not a big fan of platforming Twitter crap, and I think what this has largely been, and I don't even like addressing it, but I think it's been a lot of fan fiction from other schools. Our schools trying to tamper with Braden Smith? Of course they are. That's not new. They've done it before. And, he turned down a lot of money his freshman year, his sophomore year, and there's a lot more money probably now. But he's going to get paid really well at Purdue next year. There's this misnomer out there: Purdue doesn't take care of its players. They don't have the money to do it. That is not accurate. He is probably a millionaire right now, and he will be
more than a millionaire.
I don't want to say a multi-millionaire because I don't know if it'll get there, but he is going to make a lot of money. And this is the new world order of college sports. So if you're a fan, you don't like the fact that the point guard's driving around in a $100,000 car, the sport might not be for you anymore, because this is real. I mean, this is the deal nowadays. And Purdue's playing the game. I mean, they didn't get Oscar Clough without, offering him money. I believe he took less to come to Purdue because it's a deal where you're set yourself up too for whatever comes after Purdue. And Purdue's got such a good reputation with big guys that I think the people around him probably, and I don't even know if he's got an agent. I know he's got an
coach. I don't think he does. From what I understand, he does not.
A coach who advises him or whatever. And they put him in a place where he's going to play, he's going to win, and a place that uses its centers. It lets them play, it lets them stand out. And this was kind of the same deal for Lance Jones. Lance Jones had no idea he was going to come to Purdue and be a star. He just wanted a place to play. He didn't ask Purdue for any money that I'm aware of. That's always been the story I've been told.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He just wanted an opportunity to try to earn a. Sorry, I'm spitting up alludence here. He just wanted an opportunity to try to get a contract overseas. He wanted to play on a big stage, and he wanted to get his name out there. And damn, that worked out pretty good, didn't it?
He hit the shot heard around Purdue, the Boilermaker world too. I mean,
he became a bona fide star too. I mean,
no question. Yeah,
I'm sure as the season went on, all the money he didn't ask for came anyway because the in-season NIL opportunities probably exploded. But I think it's probably the same thing with Oscar Clough. It's I don't know if he's an NBA guy, but he just wants a chance to play at a high level, get some exposure, and then maybe get a better overseas deal than he would have before. And that's part of the long-term picture of this stuff. People focus on the short-term money, which is a big deal because money's money no matter when you get it. But college is also about set yourself up for your future, and that's part of this here too. So, but I think my original point here was that Purdue, probably didn't have to pay Oscar Clough a ridiculous, like an absurd amount of money like other people are doing right now, but they didn't get him for free.
Yeah.
They might have got him at a discount, but they didn't get him for free. It's so weird to be even talking about this stuff.
I know it is.
But what was your other question? Oh, Braden Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, again, I'm sure other schools are tampering with him, have been, but they have before. And is it possible somebody took a phone call from somebody at some point in time, and then that school ran to it somehow got from that school to their fans, and all of a sudden their fans were spamming Purdue's Twitter accounts and adding to the wall of bullshit that is Twitter nowadays? Pardon my French. Yes, but to the best of my knowledge right now, and again, this is a very weird time we're all existing in. This is fan fiction. This is Kansas and Kentucky and the incorrect assumption out there that Purdue doesn't have any money and that Braden Smith, who, by the way, whose legacy right now is being the Indiana Mr. Basketball, right, who came to Purdue, became one of the best players in Purdue history, led Purdue to the Final Four, was Big Ten Player of the Year, was one of the best guards in the history of the Big Ten Conference, and that says nothing about whatever's going to happen next year. That's his legacy right now, okay? So if you just go out now and you chase a bag and you just go take, $6 million from somebody instead of $2 million to go along with the lifetime of earning opportunities you have based on the reputation you built in your home state, your legacy then immediately becomes, the same as Coleman Hawkins and Hunter Dickinson and
how'd that work out?
These other guys who it didn't work out for, and had a great situation with coaches they like, with players they know, on a good team that's going to win, and that's a hell of a lot of stuff to risk. And I'd say the same about every player on the team who have clear paths to, being standouts. That's the difference between Purdue's big three and Miles Colvin and Camden Heide. Camden Heide and Miles Colvin want to play, and that's what every player wants. They were not necessarily guaranteed huge roles on this team next year. They were going to have to fight for their minutes. That's not me belittling them. That's not me, putting a happy face on them leaving Purdue. That was just the reality, because the people coming back who they had, or the people they competed with for minutes last year, are all back. Nothing changes to help either of those guys move up that depth chart. So between the money, the opportunity, in Camden Heide's case, he gets to live in Austin for 2 years.
Yeah, not a bad deal.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
So that's the difference here when you look at these decisions that these guys have to make. And as I said before, nobody should blame Camden Heide. Nobody should blame Miles Colvin for wanting to find some upward mobility for their opportunity quotient in their college basketball careers. But as for the guys who got it made right now, it's just, you're risking far more than you're gaining. Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Wren, no, they are good. So this is college basketball now. It's probably like keep your best guys every year by any means necessary, and then bring in a parade of guys around them every year. And I'll say personally, it sucks to cover because it's chaos. I don't know how the Illinois and Indiana media people do it. It sucks. But that's a me problem. That's not a Purdue problem. That's not a college basketball. Well, it is a college basketball problem.
It is college basketball. Yeah.
I'm just whining.
All right. Well, I'm going to let you. I want to ask you, and then I want a couple more questions. But Jakari Harris and C.J. Cox, you've talked about C.J. Cox, obviously, but these are also two guys that are going to play a big role next year. You saw a lot of what certainly both Harris and Cox, even in the Houston game, do some things that Purdue needs out of those guys. They now both know how to play when the lights are on, where I don't think that's going to be any issue. But what do you see their role next year in terms of the importance of them? We know Cox spent most of the season, at least well over half the season, as a starter. And Harris showed some real signs of improvement throughout the course of the year. They're going to play a huge role, I would think, in 25-26.
Yeah. Hey, first off, there is no difference between these things and cherry lifesavers. These don't have any medicinal value.
And that's your NIL deal, by the way, Ludens. Go ahead.
Oh, it should be.
Yeah.
So
Harrison Cox, yeah, go ahead.
The one thing that we talk about breathing room for Camden Heide and Miles Colvin to get minutes next year. The beneficiaries of all this are these two guys. Jakari Harris is a starter caliber player. He's a future leader on this team. He might be a star. I think he's got that sort of capability to him. I think he's going to be a guy fans love. I think C.J. Cox is right there with him in terms of all that stuff. C.J. Cox was a starter this year. And, it is rare nowadays for teams to be starting freshmen. But the hope then is that year two, they're much better than they were. And I think you expect now experience to really help both of those guys. They're both going to be good defensive players on the ball. And I think that can be a strength moving forward with these two guys. I don't know where Purdue's backup point guard situation is right now. I think that both of those guys can do it. They're not necessarily the true point guardiest sort of guys, but they can handle the ball. They can certainly be the secondary and third ball handler types. There's no word for third-ary. It's just
tertiary,
secondary and third ball handlers. That can really help Purdue against some areas where they struggled in non-conference. I think Jakari Harris and C.J. Cox were capable of handling the ball at the level they couldn't in the winter. They just didn't have the poise to them yet. They didn't have the experience to them yet, and they do now. So another area where a weakness can become a strength next season. I think both of them can shoot, and I think it's really important for Purdue to have shooters all over the floor. I think it's something Purdue covets to have ball handlers all over the floor. And both of those guys, I think, are poised for big things, and experience should bring the best out of them. But they obviously have to take steps this offseason, but I would expect both of those guys' hearts to be in the right place, their effort levels to be really high, and the best to be yet to come.
Well, you watched Jack Bender play a lot in AAU, and he's another guy that at least now has, and you've mentioned too, and this is not a criticism of Jack or anyone else necessarily, but the guys become popular names. They haven't played yet. We don't know. We do know that Jack Bender can shoot, and we do know that Jack Bender works hard at his game, all those kinds of things. But realistically, what do you see there? And we don't know, at least I don't, maybe you do, in terms of how they want to use him down the road, but what role he might play next year. But you saw him play a lot, certainly in his growing up years, and that is worth quite a bit. But what do you see for him, and can he play a role that helps Purdue next year?
Yeah. Everybody coming out of the redshirt year is a future star. Everybody always loves him, but I can tell you for certain what they love about Jack Bender, because I've seen it with my own two eyes. Is he is a big time shooter. I made sure before every game this year to watch him and Fletcher Lawyer shoot because it's fun.
Yeah.
It's aesthetically pleasing, if you will, to watch those two guys shoot. And Benner is just pure and natural, and he's, I don't want to, speak too loosely here, because it'll get aggregated. But I think he's as good a as skilled a shooter as I think Purdue's gotten, and he can really dribble. He's not a rocket in terms of quickness or anything like that, but what you need that position to do is be able to take a couple dribbles off a closeout and either shoot the ball or make the right pass. I talked about Camden Heide and Miles Colvin, how often do those guys get all the way to the rim off those closeouts? Purdue doesn't need Jack Penner to do that. They need him to either make a pull-up jumper the way Fletcher Lawyer does off closeouts, or make the next pass against a scrambling defense. And his IQ and his passing ability, combined with his shooting ability, which is big time, really make him a perfect fit for the profile of the offensive player that Purdue has really become a great offensive program around. Now, the questions are going to lie with his defense. I mean, he's not the quickest guy in the world, but Purdue's used to that. They've always got that guy on the floor that opponents hunt. But Benter is bigger than a lot of those guys. And Purdue, I think the system you saw Purdue run this year is sustainable. I think this is what they're doing now. And it really takes a lot of emphasis off the one-on-one defender. And I think that, he should be a really good system defender, if nothing else. He's always had quick hands. He's always anticipated things very well. He's got a lot of Fletcher Lawyer in him from an IQ perspective. From a skill perspective and a physical profile perspective, he's the closest thing to Dakota Mathias I've seen.
Yeah.
Because he can play with the ball in his hands. He can play without the ball. He can dribble. He can pass. He can shoot. He can post up. Now, whether that's part of his college repertoire, I don't know, because it's a little bit different. Posting up 3A guards or 2A guards, whatever it was at Brownstown Central, and posting up, like AJ Storr or somebody like that. I don't know why AJ Storr's in my mind right now.
I know, he seems to be.
I'm just thinking of a big guard. And I just think Jack Benner's got a great future at Purdue. It might be, as a role guy, it might be something more in time, but I think he can really help him starting next year.
All right, and obviously the national semifinal later today. Purdue did not get there, as we all know, or Brian wouldn't be doing the show from here. But obviously, Houston, the Purdue's last stop. But and you addressed this question with Derek on Tuesday in Golden Black Radio. A successful 24-12, Purdue gets to the Sweet 16. You've well documented, and we all know that Purdue did not win a Big Ten championship that some thought it would, and was in a position to do so. But now a week after that disappointing and somewhat frustrating loss to Houston, how do you put this season into words in terms of maybe success and non-successful are too black and white? But this is it's hard to scoff at Sweet 16 appearances and having two guys that played, one guy at the first team All-American level and another guy not far from it. How do you put this all into perspective now a week after that season has ended?
Yeah, I always God, jeez.
You're doing good.
I always try to. People are going to drive off the road listening to this. I always try to look at the big picture of where did you start?
Yeah.
And where did you finish? I think if you viewed Purdue as a top 16 team at the start of the year, which I think was fair.
Yeah. And they were ranked that way, right?
They finished as one of the last 16 teams standing. They were 16th in the polls, which don't mean anything because people like me vote and we don't know anything. So finishing in the final 16 is good. That's always good. I mean, I think people at Purdue kind of take it for granted sometimes here. But I think when you look too at the way Purdue finished the regular season, you would have loved to have had a Big Ten championship. You had a team capable of doing it. It just didn't happen for one reason or another. You had real limitations with this team that I think Purdue had to overcome all season long. Did Purdue overachieve in the big picture? Probably not. Did Purdue overachieve in terms of specific elements of basketball? Absolutely. Because this could have been a team that went out there every single night and got their doors blown off in the rebounding column. This is a team that overachieved defensively for half the season, and then it fell apart late in the season, and then it got it back in the NCAA tournament. They overachieved in that regard, yes. Then when you look at the big picture of this 3-year window Purdue has had with Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman, and Fletcher Lawyer as experienced guys, you got to a Final Four last year, right? You have them all coming back next year, presumably. I'll always have to add that. So next year is kind of your silver bullet, right? So setting things up this year to really do something next year, I think, was part of the story of this season. I articulated it that way before the season, not to diminish what Purdue could do this season, but just to paint a pretty broad picture of where this program is right now. Getting Jakari Harris and CJ Cox experience was a big deal. I think ending the season well was a really big deal.
Yeah.
Getting to the Sweet 16 after you lost 6 of your last 9 regular season games, or 6 of your last 9 games before the NCAA tournament, was a big deal. And then I think identifying, what you need to get to where you want to be next year and addressing it is a really big deal. So enter Oscar Clough and enter whoever's going to come next. Purdue's going to add some more potentially really impactful pieces here in the weeks to come. And on paper, they're going to end up looking pretty good. And when you've got 3 guys like you've got coming back, presumably, all things are possible. And I think this season kind of positioned Purdue for all those things to be possible.
All right, last question, and I want to talk about Mason Gillis and Duke, and of course, in the Final Four. Like I said, the Final Four on Saturday, then of course the national championship game on Monday. Would be pretty cool for Mason to he's obviously in 2 Final Fours in a row. They're going to have their hands full against Houston. I know your day job is pretty much focused on Purdue basketball, but any thoughts on what you see of the 4 teams remaining? And of course, Purdue also, to your point in the last question, Purdue has to take some. They were by far the closest, or not necessarily by far, but they were certainly as competitive of a Sweet 16 game as there was, and a team that ends up going to the Final Four, obviously in Houston. But what do you see in the Final Four? Is it Duke's to win, or how do you look at it?
Did anybody else get beat in the last 3 seconds?
Yeah, no, not like that.
That's what would qualify as the closest game in the Sweet 16 to me.
Yeah.
How many rings does Mason Gillis have now, by the way?
Lots.
He's got all these Big Ten rings that he liked to wear to Big Ten Media Day. And, I'm sure he's got a Final Four ring. And now he's going to have
another one. He's got another one.
He's going to have an ACC championship ring. And he's going to have another Final Four ring. How many rings does this guy need?
Yeah.
But no, he's obviously going to go down as one of the most uniquely winning players probably in the history of the game, on top of maybe being the first college basketball player ever to wear number 18.
Yeah, I love
depending on when he was assigned his number and when he first put the jersey on.
Yeah.
Because that was only okay this year.
Right, first year.
So there couldn't have been 18s prior to this year. So he's wearing number 18 because Duke has this little problem where all their numbers are retired.
Yeah.
Because they have all these great players. So that's the one school you'd go to get number 18. Whereas if you transferred anywhere else, chances are you wouldn't need to. So I'm guessing that probably significantly narrowed down the field of 18s out there. I'm sure that
he may be the greatest 18 of all time. Now,
somebody who likes to do, I'm sure somebody who likes to do research projects like yourself would like to go back through the pantheon of time in college basketball and find all the 18s for me. But no, in terms of this Final Four, I honestly think Houston's got a lot going for it here. it seems like every national champion has to survive a game like they survived against Purdue, and then they just absolutely boat raced
Tennessee,
and Tennessee's good. Tennessee's
good.
really good. You saw Tennessee boat race Kentucky,
And we're very impressive in that game, I thought. Yeah.
I kind of wonder if Purdue didn't like bring another layer out of Houston, didn't scare them into becoming the best version of themselves. And I think Houston Duke would be a hell of a game. And I don't know who I'd take because I think Houston's the better defensive team. I think they're the tougher team. But Duke's got Cooper Flagg, who is unbelievable. And Con Kneppel, however you pronounce his name, and Sion James, and just supreme talent. And John Shire, I think, has really gotten his bona fides, which people apparently say. As a coach, I took that from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yeah.
But I think that I think John Shire can coach. When Purdue kicked their in Portland a couple of years ago, I'm like, I don't know if John Shire is going to work here because that dude got coached under the table in that game. And but it was like his third game as a head coach, so
yeah,
of course he did. But in a job like Duke, it's tough because you have all this stuff to manage in terms of the talent and the agendas and things like that, and it can be hard to coach those types of teams, contrary to popular belief. But he seems like he's done a hell of a job, and I would really like to see Kelvin Sampson versus John Shire here, and Houston's age and physical maturity versus Duke's, wonderkind, which people apparently also say, collection of talent.
Yeah, well, you're going to get to see that
on. I will take Duke in a close game.
Okay, but on Saturday, and of course Auburn and Florida, which will be also being a really interesting game, and you like Auburn in that one. So I don't know. Florida also had to come from the depths and the sweets or in the Elite Eight to get it done. They got it done. And Michigan State played Auburn as tough as Michigan State could, but Auburn, if Broom is healthy, which he sounds like he is, they're in pretty good shape. It'll be a great Final Four, and that's for sure. So, all right, we went 42 minutes. You were only contracted to do 20, so we got 22 minutes of overtime. You can put on your time card.
Well, if you cut out the coughing,
I know
it'll take us down to a nice 12 minutes.
All right, now don't leave us because we have Tom Dienhart. We'll talk that thing called spring football. And something that Brian Neubert used to cover day in and day out, and he, like the rest of us, are going to have to figure out who's on the field. Tom does a great job of describing that, and we'll talk with him about not only what's going on in practice, but obviously Purdue will be inching its way towards not a spring game, but this, what they call it, the spring event. The spring sprung, whatever. They're going to have an event next Saturday, April the 12th as well. So, Brian, thanks again. We appreciate that. And we ask you to stay tuned because Tom Dienhart will join us for our next segment of Saturday Simulcast, brought to you by the good folks at goldenblack.com and, of course, the good folks at the Union Club Hotel. Have a great rest of your evening, Mr. Neubert. All right, we're actually going to tell people we're recording this at 5 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. That's not quite true. But get that cough better.
Hell no.
I know. I wouldn't do that to you. All right. Have a great rest of your evening. And again, stay tuned for Tom Dienhart and goldenblack.com Saturday Simulcast. Saturday Simulcast, Tom Dienhart joins me. And thanks to the Union Club Hotel for its sponsorship. Opening up the Boilerhouse Prime Restaurant also. And Tom and I will have to go and have a steak. I'm gonna have the opportunity to go next week. There's some pre-things. Somebody's invited me, and that's a great thing. But I guess it's opening for good on the 9th, not too far from where Tom lives and where I live off of Cherry Lane. The Boilerhouse Prime, going to be the premier steakhouse in the Lafayette area, and a beautiful, beautiful clubhouse. The Sam Allen, or it's really the Pete Dye complex, but Sam Allen, the donor to that, that is a spectacular facility. I'm eager to get in there to see that. My golf game isn't worth a hoot, and it's basically over, but I'm eager to go in and see that as well. And we'll have to. I don't know what's your if you were going to pick a steak, what's your favorite steak that you like? Are you a T-bone guy? Are you a ribeye guy? What's yours? Filet. What do you pick, Tom?
They make me eat in the kitchen there, Alan.
Yeah, well, no doubt. Me too.
I think the bone-in ribeye.
Yeah, hard to beat.
I guess probably would be my choice. Nothing like a nice hot, piping hot steak, a big baked potato,
yeah,
a little tossed salad with a Coca-Cola.
Yeah, it's hard to beat.
Right there.
As I said, that's we're not shills for Coke, but that would be a Coca-Cola. It's hard to beat that. But at any point in time, that in any meals is a good thing. All right, we're going to talk some spring football here. Purdue and by the time many of you listen to this will be through practice number 11. Of course, the Boilermakers, I think, are scheduled to practice on Saturday, April the 5th. But you've been through 10 practices. You're constantly having to figure out to get to know some of these guys, as do the Purdue coaches. But just an overall statement of what you're seeing from not only how the coaches handle things, but how practices at least are run. There's still a lot of names that I know are going to change and things like that. We'll get into that here in a second. But what's been the vibe there at practice from your standpoint?
Yeah, just upbeat, brisk. All business. I'll tell you what, Alan, just getting a chance to eavesdrop a little bit when Coach Odom addresses the team post-practice huddle on the field. He's got a presence about him. That's not easy to do. To speak off the cuff with confidence and have a coherent message. And he's good at it. He kind of strikes you, at least from a vocal standpoint, in a speech standpoint. Seems like he has that skill set very well. And during practices, Alan, he's very much the CEO.
Yeah.
And doesn't really spend any specifically over a abundant amount of time with any one position group. Will wander around, offer his input. So he is a true head coach of the entire team. And Alan, the last two head coaches really weren't that. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but we all know Ryan Walters was devoted to one side of the ball than the other. And then, of course, Jeff Brom was the offensive coordinator. So, yeah, it's been nice that they've allowed us to watch all these practices. Like you said, I can't believe we see light at the end of the tunnel here, April 12th. We'll have the spring showcase. So a lot's been going on, Alan. I feel pretty familiar with the personnel at this point. I even have most of the numbers memorized, if you can believe that. Just when I get these numbers memorized, Alan Karpick, some of these guys are going to be gone.
Yeah.
April 16th to the 25th, the transfer portal opens again. Brace yourself. Take some Pepto-Bismol. The Boilermakers are going to be very active, Alan. Barry Odom has said could be upwards of 20 players coming and going here in April. So be ready, my friend.
Yeah, when all eyes in the Purdue world are on Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn and Fletcher Lawyer and what they're going to do, there's going to be just as busy and maybe not as high profile, but very important. All right, you've talked about and written about and boiling over, and certainly a worthwhile read if you aren't a subscriber to goldenblack.com. You ought to think about it, and some special offers there if you want to do that. But obviously, quarterback is a huge is everything in college football. We know that, but and you have the sense that they've got what, 4 guys that are kind of battling it out. May not have the right one. We don't know just yet. But talk about that room and obviously the importance of that room. I think somebody tell me the other day that you watch Purdue football at practice, and there's certainly not at that position a huge physical presence. There's no 6'4", 6'5" Aiden O'Connell type guys obviously in that room. But talk about some of what you see there, and also obviously maybe what will happen with Barry Odom and company in terms of that in the portal, because that's going to be obviously you can't win without a good quarterback, and that's stating the obvious.
That goes back to our playground days, Alan.
Yeah. Right. He's always the first guy picked.
So he's got the ball in his hands the most, right? Makes the decisions. Yeah, Alan, by this time we know Purdue brought in 3 portal quarterbacks, Malachi Singleton, Evans Chuba, and C.J. Colson. They have the holdover Bennett Meredith. So those are your 4 main competitors, right? They have one other scholarship quarterback, Garrett Odom, who's Barry Odom's youngest son. But it's just been a 4-man battle, maybe really a 3-man battle with 3 transfers being at the top of the pecking order, Alan. I just don't think, from what I've seen and from people I've talked to, that Purdue's starting quarterbacks on the roster right now. I would not be surprised if Purdue goes into the portal here in April seeking a quarterback who's starting caliber. These guys, they have talent now, and there's just not much experience there. They have one career combined start.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And again, that the performances have been a little spotty, I'll be honest with you. I think Malachi Singleton, if you really put me back in a corner, Alan, I maybe would say Malachi Singleton would be my number 1 right now. You know why? Basically because I think he's the one you can trust the most. Mm-hmm. Not because of any overwhelming physical skill, but you can trust him the most, not to make a big mistake. Sometimes that's got to be the top of your list of your quarterback. A lot of times, don't turn the ball over. And some of these guys have had issues doing that. So, yeah, I think they got to get that spot figured out. I just don't think any of these 3 guys are really, I think at this point in their career, suited to be a starting quarterback. So yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. Maybe I'm wrong, Al, but I wouldn't be shocked if you see him try to seek a quarterback here when that portal window opens. Like I said, the 16th to the 25th. In the portal shopping list, it's going to be pretty exhaustive. I think they really want 5 to 6 offensive linemen, 2 to 3 wide receivers. I think the wide receiver room's a real concern right now, Alan.
Right.
Not a lot of game starts there. Just not a lot of experience overall. There's not an alpha wide receiver. There is not a true number 1 Big Ten wide receiver on this roster right now. I think Charles Ross from USC is a guy they like. The holdover Denylon Morissette, I think that's another guy they like a lot as well. Those are 2 guys I know that sort of caught their attention. And also the one guy who's hurt right now, Chauncey Magwood from Central Florida. I think those are your top 3 wideouts right now. Morissette, Magwood, and Ross. But Magwood, like I said, he got hurt, an ankle or a foot. I think he could be out a while. And defensively, Alan, not to go on a real long ramble here, but I think they like the D-line. I think they got 5 to 7 good D linemen up there. They really like C.J. Madden, the holdover from Georgia. Inside, I guess Jamarius Dinkins has really turned the corner for him. Someone told me T.J. Lindsey, the big tackle they got from Auburn, is a pro. He's the best player on defense. Linebacker-wise, we know they got the transfer Sanders Ellis from Tennessee State last week. That was a huge pickup, Alan. Huge. He's going to start instantly. I didn't think they were going to get the kid. Tennessee, Auburn, Virginia Tech. Purdue wasn't in the conversation if you looked at national analysts. He's coming to Purdue. Huge. I think they like their secondary, too. They've got some good cornerbacks. The kid from Boston College, Ryan Turner. Hadari Hines is a holdover. I know they like a lot. Tony Grimes from UNL will be some nice safeties. Stu Smith, I've written about Stu Smith, one of the bigger stories this spring. So I think they feel pretty good about the secondary. And it's funny, I said TJ Lindsey's the best guy on defense. I'm told the best player, the most talented player, offense or defense, special teams, is the tight end George Byrne.
Yeah.
I'm told. That's not a huge revelation. He could be your special player if he can stay healthy.
Of course, we saw, was it in 23? He had the big game against, was it 23? He had the injury against Indiana and showed what he could do.
Yeah.
And yet
TD.
Yep, and there's a lot of, and again, obviously he is a holdover from. Did Brom recruit him or Walters?
He may have signed with Brom. I think he may have signed with Brom.
On the front end,
he did sign with Brom. Yeah, there's not many of those guys left, Alan.
No, I know. That's an interesting part of it. Running back is obviously written about Devin Mockabee, and he's in today's world, you have to just any level of stability, which there isn't much, but a guy like that that's had success at the Power 4 level, and yet hangs in there. Really an amazing story, but you've written about that at length. But talk about that role, and again, and maybe it's hard from your perspective or where you sit, but how the heck do you develop guys that are leaders on teams? And certainly Maccabee is that guy, at least by example. But that's got to be a huge challenge for coaching staff to find guys that can really direct traffic, that are players that are on the field. What's your sense of that with where this team sits and all the transition?
Yeah, it's hard. There's so many new faces, Alan.
Yeah.
And I think you have to have holdover guys like a Maccabee. Hopefully they have that leadership quality to them, Alan. I don't know about you. You've been in more leadership positions than I've ever been, but it always struck me you were a leader, you're not a leader.
Yeah.
Maybe you can develop some skills to be a better leader, but I kind of think sometimes that's a born thing. I mean, we grew up, people watching this grew up, played sports, wherever you were, you always kind of knew who your leaders were. You didn't need to be told. And so again, you hope you have those kind of personalities on your team. It could be a new guy. It could be a guy that came from UNLV who knows Barry Odom's system. It's got some cachet. You can pick those guys out in locker rooms if you're a player pretty quick. And just by the way they carry themselves and how they go about their business every day. And so, yeah, I'm not sure who those leaders are, to be honest with you. I think Maccabee's got to be considered one on offense just because of the resume he's got and the way he goes about his business. He's out there every day, Alan.
Yeah,
he's out there every day. He's got clockwork, and a special person, I think. And so you hope a guy like that is, you like for a quarterback to be, but there's a lot of upheaval there, obviously. And defensively, Alan, I'm not sure who your leader would be, honestly. There's no real holdover that has that type of command, I don't think. So I think that's a question to be determined. So among many questions still.
Yeah.
To be answered here for this football team, obviously.
Well, and you look at it too, I think it puts more of an onus on coaching and coaches. They're going to have to, it's going to be to enforce discipline in some fashion to get their system installed. And I don't know, you're right. The players need to have leadership qualities, but coaches are going to even have to have more of that quality to make sure that the trains run on time and make sure your team is doing what it has to do, does things that doesn't hurt itself, penalties, those kinds of things in football. You think there's probably more of a need for that in today's world?
Yeah, it's it's a coaching staff that's caught my eye early on here.
Yeah.
Charles Clark, we talked to him this week, the defensive back coach. Impressive young man. He's not really that young. He was a high school teammate of Cliff Avrils, if you can believe it.
Yeah.
It's funny, Al, not to get off on a tangent, but he's the only coach that got hired who had no direct connection to Barry Odom. So shows you maybe how impressed they were to bring in a guy that they really didn't know. So Charles Clark, Vance Weiss, the O-line coach, reminds everybody of Danny Hope.
Yeah.
Wears his hat backwards, has his wraparound shades, and kind of skulks around the field. A big guy too. He's got a big presence about him. Kelvin Green, the D-line coach. He's the kind of D-line coach you need. You gotta come with energy with those D linemen, Alan. They're big guys. You gotta stay after them, and he stays after them. And like I said, he's really getting something out of Jamarius Dinkins right now, who really was a bust last year. And yeah, on down the line, I've been impressed with Mike Shear, the OC. And Darren Hinshaw, the quarterback's coach, who's been an offensive coordinator. So a lot of good experience. They're good people. And I think they know what they're up against. And I know they're working hard, Alan. And we're getting toward the end here. And they've given a lot of reps to a lot of players. Even walk-ons have gotten a lot of reps. It's an open market right now. Everybody's got a shot. And they obviously, I'm told, want to continually upgrade the roster like every staff does, right?
Yeah, and certainly the quarterback position. And you mentioned, I think, yesterday in Boiling Over that the staff of the Boilermaker Alliance was there and guys that we know well. but again, before June 30th, there's work to be done there. If you're going to get a quarterback, you may have to spend $1 million. You talked about that. It's just it's an interesting world because those guys are playing a huge Dave Neff and company a huge role in all this of trying to make sure that there's funding available and things that can get done at the right level for to be able to get the roster you need. I mean, that's the reality of today.
Yeah, Dave Neff, Madison, all good. Emily Cox, good people. Alan, your buddy Mark Herman was out there. Raising the star quotient on the sidelines. Rob Blackman.
There you go.
So anyway, the revenue sharing starts July 1st. Up until now, the money being spent, I guess, could be some committed for future expense from revenue sharing. But any money, I guess, any additional funds you have left in your collectives, I think teams are trying to hurry up and spend it now. So, they've got a lot of balls in the air. The GM, Brandon Lee, I know he does a good job. Ethan Baxter, the assistant GM. Alan, he's a young guy who is probably going to be a GM someday, somewhere. He's one of those, I don't know, kind of a prodigy. He looks like he's 18 years old. He's only like 26 or 27. He's already an assistant GM in a Big Ten school. So those guys, I've talked about those guys, and you seem like they're smart guys. I think you can trust or are doing what they can to juggle the books, if you will, and get the best talent they can with the money they've got. Now, I think they've got money.
Yeah.
I think they've got money. I think that was shown when they got the linebacker Sanders Ellis.
Yeah.
As much as I'm sure he'd tell you he loves to wear gold and black.
Yeah.
He says he also liked what that check looked like too. Let's be honest, right? Come on, let's be honest. And I think it's going to take upwards of $1 million to get a quarterback, and I think they can get $1 million to get a quarterback, and they're going to need more than that to get, like I said, to fill some of these other needs they've got on the roster. O-line in particular, Joey Tanona, Allen, the right and the left tackle. I think Joey Tanona, I'm told he's going to be special, and Jalen St. John, who plays next to him from UNLV, he's a cut above the kid from Canada, the center they like. Ethan Trent, Alan.
Good for Ethan.
I tell you what, he's been running with the ones at left guard because I know the guy's been hurt, but I still think they like Ethan a lot. And Ethan may end up being a starter, or at the very least, he's going to play. Great story. We all know his story. A great young man, too. And then Bakeem Coley, the big number 78. He walking off the bus, he looks like a pro. He just got to have a little bit more consistency, Alan. So, but I think they want some better depth, too, there. So that's an area that's going to obviously require some funds too, like every spot on the team, right?
Yeah. Well, Matt Painter said, like I said, on Field of 68 interview earlier this week that, or I think from the Final Four, we best embrace this, and that's the sense you best embrace the way the world is now in college sports, and Barry Odom seems to be very as comfortable as one can be. You just never hear anything to the contrary. I mean, obviously he showed that at UNLV of being able to get that live in a state of flux and be able to thrive in it. And I think that's what Purdue has to hang its hat on. Is that as simple as that in terms of developing this program over a period of time. You're going to almost have to develop who you are in the transfer world, because if you can do that, you have a chance to upgrade your talent.
Yeah, ideally, you're not dipping into the portal this much. Year 4, right? And remember, Alan, you and I talked to Barry Odom. He came on this show maybe 3 or 4 weeks after he got the job, and he mentioned this each year at UNLV he had 50 guys. I think he got 50 guys. Well, they may end up close to that number by the time we get to kickoff this fall. So, again, ideally, we know this is a roster. This is a program that's in transition. And, again, I don't think they expect year 3, 4, 5 that they're getting this many guys out of the portal. They want to be, of course, a team based on high school recruiting, which has been going on in earnest here, Alan. They got a commitment last week from a linebacker from Michigan. Going to have a bunch of kids here on Saturday, bunch of kids for the spring showcase. But again, they want to be a program based with the high school kids initially, of course, and moving forward. But for this point, Alan, we can call it a Band-Aid, or we can call it trying to bridge the gap. They need bodies in here to compete because the roster's pretty depleted, and you can't rely on high school kids right now. So they really have to lean on the portal to bolster this roster. And maybe like this, again, we know this year and next year too, maybe they have to lean on a lot next year too.
Yeah. more to come from this, and we'll obviously be talking to Tom next week as we get to the spring showcase. Programming note, that's will be Saturday. Is time been determined for the start of that?
I think it has, but I want to say noon, but I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, we'll make sure that everybody knows what that is.
Yeah,
it's going to be some form of a spring football, like you said, a spring showcase, chance for Purdue fans to come out into the Ross-Ade Stadium the same day. Obviously, that night, and Ethan Trent and his family involved with the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research 5K run, which will be on that evening, believe it or not, 7:30 is when that will take place after the spring showcase. So a lot to stay tuned. Tom will have all this coverage this week heading into the end of spring ball. We'll have Tom. I'm not sure exactly. We'll probably do our Saturday simulcast after the spring showcase. That seems to make sense next week. And I'm sure Brian Neubert also will have what's the latest on the basketball situation in the portal there is Matt Painter and company dip their toes, or they actually wade knee deep into that, because that's where all coaches are when it comes to that. All right, Tom, thanks so much for everything. We appreciate your coverage. I want to thank the Union Club Hotel, Boilerhouse Prime Restaurant, again, opening up at the Pete Dye, the new Pete Dye Clubhouse on Cherry Lane. And going to be opening up, I believe, at the end of next week. So great chance for folks that would be interested in doing that. We appreciate them. So have a great rest of your week, everybody. Thanks so much. And we'll see you next time on Saturday Simulcast.